Hello mate, welcome back to the channel. So today we have it's our 14th Ascendancy class design and we are making fast progress. So strap in, this time we're hitting up the warrior class. This will be the first warrior Ascendancy, and so I wanted to tee it off with something very different. And as you can tell by the title, this is not a class that we've imagined before necessarily. Absolutely wasn't an option in PoE 1, and that is the Brawler. Alright, so for the Warrior and the Marauder class, it's not obvious immediately how they're going to be wildly different, and we sort of talked about this when we were doing the Marauder Ascendancies, that the Marauder, from what Jonathan has sort of alluded to, the idea is that they're a bit faster, a bit more ferocious, and the Warrior is slightly slower and heavier. And so we wanted to think about Ascendancies that kind of fit into this like big, heavy, you know, strongman kind of theme. And I think returning, we're definitely going to get the Juggernaut. That's just an idea that I have, and I think it thematically fits this warrior playstyle very, very strongly. And then I think we've got another one which I think will be kind of obvious, and that is that we are going to get some kind of Earth Shaker class. There was a reveal in one of the media kits, very similar to the Arcane Archer archetype that we created the Weaver based on, and that was for like an Earth Shaker, and so thinking like big slams, big cracking the earth, and having all these sort of effects based on that. So we're going to take a look at something like that as well. But for this one, I wanted to start off with something a little bit crazy and just like a wild card. Every one of these base classes, I try and come up with something that's just a little bit unexpected. And for this one, we have created the Brawler. Now, what is the Brawler? What I'll do, I'll read the description I've come up with and we'll take it from there, just to give you some flavor. Life makes much more sense when winning the day is as simple as winning the next fist fight. The Brawler doesn't need fancy titles or medals. His battlefield is the tavern, and he'd gladly trade airs and graces for spit and sawdust any day. A wrestler, a pit fighter, a tavern brawler. If not being thrown from pillar to post, his enemies are likely confused in the chaos he incites. Though when all is said and done, a true brawler is happy to get the next round in for the real fighters amongst us. So the themes on this one are taunt, brawl, wrestle, and unarmed. So I'll get into the nodes in just a second, but my thinking around this was kind of like a big WWE, you know, WWF for those older heads amongst us, wrestler. A big lumbering guy who doesn't need weapons necessarily. He's kind of your Zangief, right, from Street Fighter, that kind of thing. And I thought, what an interesting idea. Let's try and explore that theme and see what we can come up with. So let's get into the tree. All right, starting off, what we'll do, we'll move round to the left and then we'll head downwards. So this kind of top half of the tree is all quite interconnected, and that's because you'll see in a minute, but I wanted to give a lot of flexibility about how you want to build your Ascendancy, and so having all these branches allows you to do that. So if we start off down the left, we get some melee damage, and then we get some maximum life, and we come to the first node, Bully. Nearby enemies are smothered. Nearby, by the way, is within 4 meters of you, I believe. That may have changed, but let's just imagine nearby within 4 meters of you. Smothered enemies have a 25% chance to fail casting spells and miss projectile attacks. Your melee hits pin smothered enemies for 4 seconds. So before we move on to the next bit, the idea of this is essentially it's kind of like you're getting up in their face and you're creating chaos. And a lot of you'll notice chaos is a bit of a theme around this, creating a bit of a ruckus. And so any caster or projectile based enemy, you can get involved, jump up into them, you know, leap slam, movement skills, whatever it takes. And you're essentially getting 25% mitigation, which is very, very powerful. However, you have to be on top of them in order to do that. Now, in order to help you keep on top of them, you're able to pin anyone with melee hits within the 4 meter radius of nearby. Now, 4 seconds might be too long. Maybe this needs to be 1 second or 2 seconds, and that just allows the enemy a bit more freedom. Who knows? Movement skills grapple up to 2 enemies, dragging them with you. Large enemies are unaffected. So this was just a really funny thing. You can imagine this is kind of like, not quite like a clothesline, but chucking the enemy over your shoulder and then jumping with them or something like that. Or as you're running, you're grabbing 2 smaller enemies and moving them. And it just adds a bit of dynamism to the gameplay. And I think it will really support this kind of melee playstyle, which allows you to be moving enemies around. And we're going to see a bit more of that. So Bully, that's the first one. And then if we come up to the left, we get melee damage and max life again. And then we've got Brawl. Enemies that attack you have a 15% chance to hit another random enemy within 3 meters of you instead. This chance is increased by 1% for each enemy within 5 meters of you, up to 30%. Taunt enemies for 4 seconds within 8 meters every 10 seconds. So that's basically what, it's almost screen wide that is. So every 10 seconds, you're going to be doing a 4-second taunt on all of the enemies. And you take 10% less damage from taunted enemies. So the point of this is you're causing a little bit of a brawl, like a tavern brawl. And within this chaos, you're adding a defensive layer, but it's quite a unique defensive layer where enemies can actually hit each other. This percentage goes up the more enemies that are nearby you, and you have a 15% flat rate. So it's a very strong defensive layer, but it's contingent on different kind of numbers of enemies being around you. It can go up to 30. Maybe that number needs to come down, maybe not. And then the taunt element is using taunt as an ability to try and kind of get people close to you and then boost the effect of Brawl. Next up, if we carry on going around, again, melee and life. And then we've got Ruckus. Mark my words, I'll be the last one standing. It's a little bit of a nod to Mark, one of the game directors over on PoE. You have a 25% chance to knock back enemies. That is doubled with 2-handed weapons. And then enemies that collide with an object or wall take another 50% of the hit damage. And enemies that collide with one another take 25% of the hit damage. So similar to what we did with the Valkyrie, where there was an opportunity to throw a spear and then impale multiple enemies, this is that kind of using a bit of that idea for melee. So you imagine you've got a big 2-handed mace, maybe you've got some knockback effect from elsewhere that's giving you a 100% chance to knock back, and you're just swinging enemies and sort of clubbing them into one another, and then they're taking additional, essentially 25% more damage if they hit each other, or 50% more damage if they hit into a wall or an object. And so this could really sort of reward if you're fighting up against a rare and you want to get them in the corner, and then you keep hitting them into the corner. You're getting a chance, if you're knocking them back, to then be doing extra damage also whilst tactically kind of strategically keeping them in a location. And that could work for pillars, for weapon racks, for anything. So I think that could be fun, mechanical, skill shot style gameplay. Next, we've got some melee damage and knockback chance. And then we have Punch Drunk. So Punch Drunk is essentially a tier 2 node, so you have to take either Ruckus or this node down here. But Punch Drunk, knocking back, it changes the way knockback works. So knocking back an enemy also builds stun. This stun build amount is doubled if they collide. So if they collide with an enemy or with an object. Enemies that collide into one another or an object are mini stunned for 0.2 seconds. So not only are you building up more stun on them, but you're also guaranteeing a mini stun. So this 0.2 seconds would be super quick, but it's also, I think importantly, a disrupt. So this could be disrupting charged attacks, this could be disrupting anything, any casting, anything that takes the enemy a long amount of time. You can essentially be constantly disrupting them. This might have to have like a chance, because if there was a weird scenario where you could perm a mini stun an enemy from it ever attacking you, that would obviously be problematic. But the real kicker in mechanical change that this node also adds is that knockback direction is randomized. So anytime you knock back an enemy, it can be in any 360-degree direction, and your critical skills double your knockback distance. So you're getting in some interesting mechanical changes to knockback by changing this, and again creating that kind of very chaotic situation where you're hitting a ton of enemies and they're all getting knocked back in different directions, potentially hitting each other and increasing your collide chance. Alright, more knockback chance and some melee, and then we get beatdown. So beatdown's kind of like a bully, you know, like a boss rare focus kind of node. So you're dealing 30% more damage against enemies that are heavy stunned, and you deal 1% more damage for every 4% of life an enemy is missing. And then on top of that, rare and unique enemies are stunned, or they're heavy stunned whenever they reach 25% life. And this heavy stun does not reset their current stun progression. So, say you've built up half a bar of stun on a boss. This is what you can really imagine this in boss situations. You get it down to like 25% life, but you're only at that half bar. You'll get a full heavy stun, and then once it's recovered, it will still have that half bar. So this is as you're kind of getting the boss tired and you're beating them down, you are essentially giving yourself a free stun in that last portion of the fight, which I think could come in clutch on top of all the damage buffs. Alright, now let's move over to the right, and then we'll go into the more kind of nuanced and interesting stuff. So this one here is quite simple. Thick Skull, it's just a defensive node. So you're gaining physical damage mitigation. You know, you're used to getting beaten up. You've built up some kind of like bone fracture calluses and stuff. And on top of that, any savage hit, so that's anything that deals over 15% of your life in a single hit, you take 30% less damage from. So this doesn't apply to damage over time or lots of small hits, but then you have a 50% chance to instantly recover from stuns as well. So this isn't full stun avoidance or anything like that. This is, if you get stunned, you have half a chance to completely shake it off straight away. Nice little defensive node there. And then, do you know what we'll do? I think we'll come over to the left and we'll have a look at this unarmed node. So we've got some armor rating and some max life. And then we've got Metal Fists. So this is a real weird, wild node, but stick with me, I think it's kind of fun to think about. Your gloves become Metal Fists. Metal Fists are a special item that cannot be unequipped. They can be crafted and have a unique mod pool. Their item level is equal to your character level. The mod pool will therefore upgrade over time with the item level increasing, and you get higher tier mods available to you. And here is an example of what this item looks like. So your glove slot will essentially be locked out. You gain the Brawler's Metal Fists item, and it's a unique item that can be crafted. So you might actually have to like change the color of this to make it truly unique if you really needed to. Here's just some example stats, and I'll kind of talk you through them on what I was thinking and sort of what the theme of this is. Definitely isn't a fixed thing, but you're gaining, the implicit is you gain 2 to 4 physical damage per level. So anytime you're attacking with these gloves using unarmed skills, you'll be gaining some additional damage. That might need to be lower, that's fine. There's a gain onslaught on stun, there's 100% fizz convert to fire. You can read the notes for yourself, but essentially what I wanted to do is create like an interesting little unique mod pool for one item that's based around one ascendancy. Now, these could probably be much more creative and come up with different things that are much more thematically linked to like punching and, you know, maybe the different unarmed skills that we're going to get in the game. But I had some fun just thinking about these, and essentially the idea that you could have an item that has a unique mod pool that you are constantly improving over the life of the character, I thought was really interesting. And the fact that, like I said a minute ago, the item level improves, then maybe some mods are locked out until, you know, if you wanted to balance this, so you didn't take it as your first ascendancy node and just spend a load of currency crafting some godlike thing. All of these would be kind of mods that are improving things, converting things, increases. They wouldn't necessarily be flat mods. And then everything else is scaled around level, including the item level and the tiers. So this was just a pretty wild idea, but I thought if you really wanted to lean into like an unarmed playstyle and use unarmed skills and have like, you know, interesting unique effects around that, then maybe this could be an ascendancy that offers that. And it's just one node that's kind of off to the side and offers a really unique little flavor. So that's the Metal Fists node. Next up, we'll go on to what I think is thematically the most interesting, or like just fun, I'll say, definitely fun, but was probably mechanically one of the most difficult things to come up with. And that is this node. So you're getting flask charges gained and flasks, and you're getting the node Tankard. So have a drink or 10 is the little bit here, and basically what it is I wanted to include something that was around drinking and this kind of tavern lurking brawler wrestler who just loves having a good pint of beer. And we thought, okay, well, how could we mess around with this? And this basically took us like a few hours on stream, and we were going back and forth on loads of different ideas, but we knew we wanted to make it about flasks and using flasks in an interesting way. So consume all charges of any flask used. You gain Tankard for each second based on the type of flask you consume. So anytime you consume a flask, you're getting this 8-second buff. And then if it's a life flask, you're getting really strong recoup, but your evasion rating is unlucky because you're stumbling around. It's not like Drunken Master Cool, it's like you're just a bumbling idiot at this point. And then you've got Mana Flask, 80% less mana cost of skills, but 100% increased cooldowns. Kind of got that hangover effect. And then Utility Flasks, you're gaining Adrenaline, which is a super strong buff, but you are gaining the inverse of the Utility Flask. So I want to go into just like the thinking around this. This is a balance nightmare, and we were sort of talking about how to make this feel powerful but also have drawback. Things like your evasion rating is unlucky is pretty obvious. The cooldown duration, I think, is, matches with the Mana Flask node pretty well. The Utility Flask one's interesting. We gave a really strong upside of Adrenaline, but also you're losing the effect of the Utility Flask, which I think is really important, because you might look at this and go, okay, this is incredibly powerful, but you're losing your actual Utility Flask as well. So really what you're doing when you're picking your Utility Flasks here is you're going, what's the thing that my build can handle? So if that was a Sapphire Flask, it would inflict freeze on you. Now, are you freeze immune from some other effect on your character? Have you got reduced effect of cold ailments, something like this? We don't know what will be in the game. And then the same for, imagine Quicksilver slows you or Antidote Flask poisons you. And so can you mitigate those effects to then gain the benefit of using that Utility Flask? But remember, you're not gaining the benefits of the Utility Flask at all. Whereas the Life and Mana Flask, you're still getting those benefits because they don't have this inverse. You might want to have a slightly different version of this that can give you some extra benefits. And so that is where we double down. We gain some more flask charges and flask effect. And then we get Pickled. Pickled Liver and Aged Tolerance. So consume a random flask every 8 seconds, recover these flask charges at the end of the effect, and remove the downsides of Tankard. Flask you use manually do not grant Tankard. The idea behind this is, what if you don't like the complete downside and all of the sort of removal of your ability to use your flasks in a kind of actually practical way and not consume all of them, etc. This is a way for you to get all of the manual flask uses that you would normally have. So anytime you press the button, you're going to gain that exact flask effect with no downsides or anything. The difference here now is that every 8 seconds you're essentially drinking a flask and gaining all the upsides of whatever that is. So the interesting little mini game that could be going on for players to min-max this would be, well, what flasks do you want to have on your bar to guarantee different effects? For example, if you gave up all of your life and mana flasks and just had utility flasks on your belt, then you could have permanent uptime of adrenaline. The opportunity cost there is that you now don't have any life flasks or mana flasks, which are probably going to be quite important. So I think the interesting game here is weighting your flask uses. So do you have one life flask, one mana flask, and the rest utility? How few life flasks can you get away with, and how few mana flasks can you get away with? That's the question. Overall, I think this ended up being a really successful attempt at trying to create some kind of a drunk node, right? Where you've got strong benefits, you've got quite strong drawbacks, and you can kind of control it in different ways. And if you double down into it, you get a bit more control and some more benefits as well. So I just think this would be an interesting one. It might open up lots of different build opportunities for that side of the tree and for the warrior class. And yeah, I mean, let me know what you think. I've got to give a huge shout out as well to everyone. I won't do all the names, but everyone who was on stream when we were going through this. It was such a good laugh. We had a good time doing this. I mentioned it in the last video as well. So if you do want to join us on stream for, more stuff as we design things, then definitely come join over on Twitch. You can find me at SylverXYZ, and just follow and set notifications and stuff. You'll just be notified when I'm live. I don't have a schedule right now. Yeah, that is the Brawler. So I tried something real different, live out that WWF fantasy. Maybe, we need to have like an ultimate move node or something like that. Like everyone has their signature move in wrestling. But yeah, it was a blast to come up with. I think if I was gonna pick a build, without getting into all the nuances of Tankard, because there would be some really interesting stuff I'm sure that you could come up with for that. I think absolutely I would just be doing a lot of this mobility stuff. So I would probably take Bully, So that, you know, huge defensive layers. I'd also get Brawl. I'd get Ruckus because I'd want to be knocking people back and doing that extra damage. I like that kind of tactical gameplay. So I'd probably then get Beatdown just for the damage, the heavy stuns. So this would just be a really heavy control kind of build. If I was going hardcore, I'd lose the damage and I'd get Thick Skull. Probably going to try and play hardcore at some point, you know, once we've died like 500 times in softcore in early access. So also, while we're here talking about early access, I thought I will just give a nod to the recent kind of information and drama and stuff that came out of Tokyo Game Show. I know there's a few people talking about it. The news is that apparently we're only going to be getting 3 acts at the start of early access. Now, whether or not they do this like early on in Path of Exile 1's history, where essentially we had 3 difficulties, kind of like D2, we play the same part of the campaign, we level up, we get harder mods, etc., and then we move up into the end game that way, or we just go straight from whatever they've got, you know, Act 3 into the end game somehow, and they sort of like power level us or de-level everything. I'm not sure. We're not even 100% sure if this is confirmed. This was translated from a Japanese interview with one of the members of the team. This wasn't like an official press release or anything. The reaction to this has obviously been negative, which will then, the team will hear about this at some point, I'm sure. And I just don't want this to like become a huge thing. Now, people are entitled to do whatever the hell they want, right? And think what they want. I guess just from my perspective, my 2 cents is, I'm not reading too much into this. Of course, it would be great to have 6 acts. I'm not being blindly positive here either. Like, you know, it's disappointing. But the thing that I would say is, we're going to get them at some point. If they feel like they need more work, then that's just a good thing. I think many of us in the community just think, okay, well, when it's ready, right? We have that when it's ready mentality because we've experienced games that have been rushed out, or developers have felt like they've had to put something out that they're probably not happy with. So if the guys aren't happy with it, then I'm glad we won't get it. But at the same time, I'm really hopeful that we get as much content as possible. And maybe if we only get 3 acts, then every month we get another act. And to be honest, I think that'd probably be enough, you know? Either way, I think we're all still going to be hyped. We're all going to be, you know, getting those early access packs and tuning in anyway. So if we have to wait a little bit longer, it would just be that much sweeter when we finally get it. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I just wanted to address it because I was going to do a whole video about it, and I thought, no, do you know what? I'll just talk about it at the end of this one. So that's it for this video. That's the Brawler. That's our first Warrior Ascendancy. As I said before, we're going to have a Juggernaut style Ascendancy, and we're going to have this Earthshaker version of our version of what that could mean, because we just got a name before and an image. So look forward to that. I've got more of these coming out every 2-3 days. That's the plan. We're streaming from time to time to get these designed and get the artwork done. So friends, exiles, thank you so much for joining me. I will see you in the next one. Ta-da.